Satoru is a failed artist at the age of 29, a coward who always runs away from the harsh reality. And then one day he was falsely accused of being the murderer of his mother, a kidnapper and killer. In a desperate effort to prove his innocence, he unexpectedly used his ability to turn back time, sending himself back to the past to find the real killer and make him pay for everything. This is Fujinuma Satoru, a 29-year-old struggling manga artist who feels a creeping fear. A fear of delving into his own mind where repressed memories and emotions are hidden, and this fear seems to deeply affect his art, leading an editor to bluntly comment that although his works have no clear technical flaws, they lack something crucial, a necessary depth, because he needs to dig deeper when he draws, as his work is too constrained and fails to reflect his true self. This bitter criticism makes Satoru feel like he doesn't belong, especially at the age of 29, an age when many people have already established their careers, while he is still struggling with a part-time pizza delivery job just to make ends meet. Every day, the words, "if only I had done things differently," keep echoing in his mind. Yet they never carry any real sense of regret, only a passing excuse, a way to avoid facing his own stagnation because he is truly afraid of digging deep into his mind, where unhealed wounds still linger. And so his daily life drifts on, filled with short and superficial conversations at work, like when he prepares to go on delivery and his coworkers remind him to be careful, or when his high school colleague Katajiri Eri teases him not to sneak a bite of pizza on the way, a joke she repeats every time they meet, making Satoru wonder if it's some kind of humor only the younger generation understands. At the same time, he finds her rather strange, because she doesn't seem to have any special feelings for him, yet she always says the same thing, although he himself doesn't really care about kids that much. Until one day, while riding his scooter for a delivery, a strange feeling suddenly comes over him, an unexplainable anomaly making him realize that the phenomenon he calls revival is happening again. He starts looking around, trying to identify what's wrong, what's about to happen, and then he sees a truck moving erratically, with the driver slumped over the wheel. At the same moment, a boy is running into the street, so Satoru acts on instinct. He turns his scooter to block the runaway truck, colliding head-on with another car coming from the opposite direction. Even though he knows he shouldn't get involved, he can't stop himself, and in that moment, his life flashes before his eyes like a film in slow motion. He thinks that nothing good ever happens when he interferes in other people's affairs, and that his death wouldn't really matter. But then he wakes up in the hospital, with Eri beside him. She happily tells him that he's been unconscious for 2 days, and fortunately he still remembers that he is Fujinuma Satoru, 29 years old, and the reason he's here is because of an accident while chasing after a truck. Eri explains that it's a miracle he's almost completely uninjured, and she reveals that the truck driver died of a heart attack while driving, while Satoru saved a child's life, an act that deeply impressed her because she was at the scene, and he was the only one who noticed something was wrong. Although Satoru humbly says that he just got lucky, Eri sees right through him. She remarks that he seems to be surrounded by a thin barrier, someone who doesn't easily open up to others and never smiles. But then, when he thanks her for reporting the situation to the manager, a faint smile appears on his lips and Eri immediately notices it. Then Satoru suddenly asked Eri why she was working, a question that surprised her, but which she willingly answered, saying that she had a dream, though she didn't say what that dream was, because she felt that if she spoke it out loud, it would become reality. Those words stirred a strange sense of nostalgia within Satoru. Later, when he was alone, he reflected on the revival phenomenon, an ability that forced him to rewind time by about 1 to 5 minutes before a tragedy occurred, as if someone was compelling him to prevent it. As a result, he had stopped many accidents, though sometimes, as in this case, the negative consequences ended up falling on him instead. After being discharged from the hospital and returning to his apartment, he was surprised to find his mother, Fujinuma Sachiko, there. She said she had gone to visit him at the hospital, but since he was sleeping deeply, she came to his place first, and decided to stay for a while to take care of her precious, only son after he hit his head, even though Satoru insisted he was fine and that there was only one bed in the apartment. Still, she was determined to stay, even saying that she would use the sleeping bag in his closet. Sachiko, a 52-year-old woman who looked far younger than her age, possessed sharp insight and extraordinary powers of observation. She seemed to be able to read her son's thoughts, even teasing him that he didn't need to tiptoe to the bathroom at night because she wouldn't wake up easily, something that made Satoru secretly call his mother a demon. One evening, while they were watching the news, a report came on about a first-grade child who had gone missing in Saitama, but was found safe. which brought back memories for Sachiko of a tragic event that had taken place in their neighborhood when Satoru was in 5th grade. She asked him if he still remembered, explaining that they had tried their best to erase as much of that memory as possible from his mind because his life had once been in danger. Satoru began to remember when he was in 5th grade. 2 of his classmates had been kidnapped and murdered, and a young man named Shiratori Jun, whom the children called Yuuki-san because he always talked about courage, had been arrested and convicted as the serial killer. That memory still haunted Satoru. The next day, while Satoru and his mother were at the supermarket, the revival phenomenon happened again, confusing Satoru because he couldn't identify its cause. He asked his mother to look around for anything unusual, and with her keen eyes, Sachiko noticed a man in a car leading a child away. When their eyes met, the man covered his face and drove off, immediately giving her a sense that something wasn't right. Later, they ran into Eri, and Sachiko invited her over for dinner to have the curry she was planning to cook. During the meal, Eri discovered that Satoru was a manga artist and expressed deep admiration, saying that Satoru was like a respected friend to her. Words that left Satoru slightly embarrassed, while his mother teased them about their relationship. After Eri went home, Sachiko spoke to Satoru about what had happened in the supermarket parking lot, revealing that it was an attempted kidnapping that failed. This led her to connect it with the case from 18 years ago, the memory of Satoru's classmate, Hinizuki Kayo, who always stayed alone in the park and was one of the victims, came flooding back into his mind. He remembered the last time he saw her and felt a deep regret for not asking her to walk home with him, something he wanted to forget more than anything, and perhaps something his mother had also tried to help him forget. Meanwhile, Sachiko began piecing the events together. She remembered the rental car's license plate, the way the man had covered his face when their eyes met, and the familiar feeling she got from his eyes. She realized she knew who that man was, and a shocking truth flashed through her mind. Perhaps Shiratori Jun had not been the real culprit. She immediately called an acquaintance, then returned home, knowing that the case was not truly over and that the real killer was still at large. She felt she had to talk to Satoru to tell him the entire truth. But she also realized that stirring up the past had put both her and her son in danger. The killer knew that he had been identified. At that very moment, the murderer attacked her from behind. She tried to grab her phone but failed. When Satoru finished work and returned home, he noticed that the door was unlocked, something unusual, since his mother was always careful. He called out to her, but there was no response. Then he stepped into the living room and was confronted with a horrifying sight: his mother lying on the floor in a pool of blood, a knife stabbed into her back. Satoru panicked, shaking her in desperation, but it was already too late. Her blood stained his hands, and just then, a neighbor came by to return some curry his mother had shared with her the night before. When she saw the scene, she screamed in terror. Moments later, the police arrived, finding Satoru with blood on his hands, and immediately identified him as the prime suspect. In that moment, Satoru's mind was filled with only one thought: everything was wrong. He didn't do it. Overcome with panic, he ran. As he fled from the police, the most powerful revival phenomenon he had ever experienced suddenly occurred. This time, it didn't send him back just a few minutes, it hurled him far into the past. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a place both familiar and distant. He saw a childhood friend calling his name and realized he was wearing a school backpack. He had traveled back to the past, back to being an elementary school boy, just before the horrifying series of kidnappings began. Satoru found himself thrown into a chaotic, unfamiliar reality, his 29-year-old consciousness trapped inside his younger self's body. He realized he had time traveled to February 15, 1988, an event he called the revival phenomenon. But this time, its scale was far beyond anything he had ever experienced, not just a few minutes, but a full 18 years. He found himself sitting in his old classroom, surrounded by childhood friends chatting excitedly about TV shows like Masked Men and Black, or video games like Dragon Quest Roman 3, names that evoked a long-lost era. A wave of disorientation washed over him. He couldn't even remember where his seat was. Absent-mindedly, he walked toward the desk of Hinizuki Kayo, a quiet, solitary girl, and was immediately teased by his classmates, who joked that he liked Kayo and that two weirdos like them would make a perfect pair. As the teacher took attendance, frantic thoughts raced through Satoru's mind. Why was he here? What on earth was happening? Was this reality? Because he was reliving a past from 18 years ago, a past he had tried so hard to forget. Overwhelmed, he pretended to have a headache to go to the infirmary, but instead grabbed his bag and ran straight home. A burning desire to see his mother Sachiko, the very woman he had just witnessed being brutally murdered in the future, drove his every step. When he reached home, he called out, "Mom," his voice trembling with both pain and relief. But she wasn't home yet. She was still at work. He stepped inside, feeling a deep nostalgia for everything around him. When she finally appeared alive, healthy, and radiant, Satoru was overcome with emotion. His mother, though surprised and a little confused by his strange behavior, gently comforted him. Dinner began with the humble Hamburg steak. She had cooked a simple dish that now held immense meaning for Satoru. It was the taste of peace, of family, of precious moments he had once lost and now had the chance to reclaim. He realized he had forgotten these small, happy moments and swore to himself that he would never let them slip away again. He understood that this great revival had a purpose, a second chance to correct past mistakes, and he believed that to save his mother's life in the future, he would have to start right here, in this past, by preventing the tragedy that was about to unfold. And at the center of that tragedy was none other than Hinizuki Kayo, the girl who would become the first victim in a series of kidnappings and murders, an event that shaped the fearful and regretful person he would become later in life. Returning to school, Satoru began to observe Kayo more carefully, and he soon noticed a bruise on her leg, a clear sign of abuse. This confirmed his vague suspicions and strengthened his resolve to intervene. Meanwhile, his friends Kazu, Osamu, Hiro, and especially Kenya, a boy wise and perceptive beyond his years, once again took notice of Satoru's attention toward Kayo. They kept teasing him, and Kazu even ran to tell Kayo directly that Satoru liked her. This led to an extremely awkward confrontation after school. Kayo bluntly asked Satoru if he was stupid, then called him a fake just like her. Her remark stunned Satoru because it struck at his very core, as he was someone who had always tried to play the role of an ideal version of himself to fit in with others, a habit he had carried since childhood all the way into adulthood. And Kayo seemed to have seen right through that facade. The conversation ended strangely when the girl suddenly asked him if he could kill someone for her, a question filled with despair and darkness. After their talk, Satoru reflected deeply on Kayo's words. He realized that by calling him fake, she didn't mean she knew he was from the future, but that she recognized he was just like her, both of them wearing masks. He played the role of a cheerful, sociable boy, while she acted indifferent and emotionless. Both were trying to hide their pain and fear inside. Then Kenya approached Satoru, saying he felt that Satoru's concern for Kayo was something very important, not just a childish crush, and offered his help along with the others. Afterward, Kenya subtly suggested that Satoru read the student essay collection, where Satoru found Kayo's essay titled "The Town Where Only I Vanish." The essay was a silent cry for help, a painful confession of extreme loneliness and a yearning to escape to an island with no adults, no friends, no teachers, and no mother, a place without suffering or sorrow. Reading those lines, Satoru fully understood Kayo's situation, and he knew he had to act. He began planning, and the first step was to create an opportunity for them to grow closer. He asked his mother for permission to hold a birthday party on March 2nd, planning to invite Kayo. This was something he had never done in the past, a small change that could create a different future. Afterward, he went to find Kayo at the park after school, where she usually sat alone until dark to avoid going home. He approached her, and this time, he decided to be honest. He admitted that he was acting, but it was because he wanted friends and wanted to be liked by others, and he believed that if you play a role long enough, it eventually becomes a part of who you are, a thought that reminded him of something Eri had once said in the future. Satoru's sincerity seemed to reach Kayo, and he took the opportunity to invite her to his birthday party, emphasizing that she was the first person he invited. After a moment of surprise, Kayo agreed. In that moment, as snow began to fall, Satoru realized his hands were freezing because he had forgotten his gloves, and Kayo suddenly took one of his hands to warm it. A small but deeply meaningful gesture, the first connection between two lonely souls. It made the 29-year-old Satoru's mind flustered and his face flush red. And when the girl said he had become easier to talk to lately, Satoru accidentally blurted out that it was because he decided not to lie to her anymore. This made Kayo embarrassed and run away, but perhaps, deep down, she felt a little warmth in her heart. Standing alone in the snow-covered park, at the very place where he had last seen Kayo 18 years ago, Satoru reaffirmed his resolve. He would no longer let Kayo be alone, he would stay by her side, change her painful past, and by doing so, change his own future. His 29-year-old mind began working urgently as he pieced together the fragmented memories of the old tragedy, recalling that not only Hinizuki but also Nakanishi Aya and Sujita Hiromi were victims. However, he realized an important detail. Only Hinizuki was 10 years old at that time, meaning her birthday had not yet come when she disappeared in March. From this, Satoru deduced a crucial timeframe: X day, the day Hinizuki was kidnapped. It had to fall somewhere between March 1st and her birthday. If he could pinpoint that day, he could prevent the abduction and alter the tragic timeline completely. At school, the atmosphere became lively with a skating competition where the boys would compete in pairs, and unfortunately, Satoru was matched with Hamada, the star of the national championship winning ice hockey team, an opponent he knew he had no chance of beating in the past. The girls urged Hinizuki to cheer for Satoru, and she hesitantly asked him if he thought he could win. Wanting to impress her and draw her out of her shell, Satoru promised he would try his best. When the race began, Satoru, with the advantage of an adult's understanding of physics and body mechanics, had an excellent start, taking the lead over Hamada to everyone's amazement. But then an internal conflict erupted within him. He felt it was unfair to defeat someone who had trained hard every day using an advantage that no one else knew about. He thought Hamada was the one who truly deserved victory, and so he deliberately slowed down to let Hamada pass and finish first. However, this fake act of nobility backfired bitterly. Hamada felt insulted, angrily confronted Satoru, and told him he hated people like him. Satoru realized he had just repeated the exact same mistake he made 18 years ago, a mistake born from trying to act good instead of being honest and facing things head-on. After the race, Satoru tried to talk to Hinizuki, but with the perceptiveness of someone who was also hiding behind a mask, she immediately saw through the lie behind his performance. Coldly, she told him that both of them were fakes and liars, further widening the distance between them. Satoru felt hopeless. He knew that in order to carry out his plan, he needed to break down the wall between them, and the first step was to find out her birthday to confirm his theory about X day. Determined to uncover the truth, Satoru returned to school and sought out his homeroom teacher, Yashiro Gaku, a man Satoru noticed had sharp eyes and keen insight. Yashiro quickly guessed that Satoru was worried about Kayo, and when Satoru explained that he couldn't ask her directly about her birthday, Yashiro readily showed him the class contact book. Satoru was stunned to discover that Hinizuki shared the same birthday as him, March 2nd. Yashiro explained that perhaps Kayo was too shy to mention the coincidence and encouraged Satoru to celebrate their birthdays together. He also advised Satoru that whatever he did, whether in the race or in his relationship with Kayo, he should always give his best effort. Now Satoru had the final piece of the puzzle. He knew for certain that X day, the day Hinizuki's fate would be decided, was March 1st, only 11 days away. Satoru went to the park to find Hinizuki, but she was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he unexpectedly encountered Shiratori-jun, the man the kids called Yuuki-san, who, in the future, would be wrongfully sentenced to death. With the eyes of a 29-year-old, Satoru now saw Yuuki-san completely differently, not as a suspicious unemployed man, but as a gentle 23-year-old who stuttered, worked hard from 4 a.m. at his father's shop, and tried to speak properly to sound more mature in front of the kids. Satoru asked Yuuki-san about Hinizuki, and he confirmed that he knew her and had talked to her several times at the park. This meeting further strengthened Satoru's belief that Yuuki-san was completely innocent, and he silently vowed that he would prevent the crime from happening, not only to save Hinizuki, but also to save Yuuki-san's future. Unable to find Hinizuki at the park, a terrible premonition led Satoru to her house, where he found her hiding in a cluttered old shed in the yard. He also found her burnt gloves outside. When he tried to persuade her to come out, Hinizuki's mother appeared with a face full of hostility, and Satoru saw the bruises on Hinizuki's body with his own eyes. When he questioned the mother, she forced Hinizuki to lie that she had fallen, and Satoru, trapped in the body of a 10-year-old, felt utterly powerless and furious. He could only stand there and watch as the woman dragged Hinizuki inside, followed by the sounds of a brutal beating echoing through the air, a scene forever engraved in his memory. The next day at school, the atmosphere was extremely tense. Hinizuki arrived late, her wounds clumsily hidden, and then an incident occurred: the class's lunch money went missing. A classmate named Misato immediately blamed Hinizuki, claiming that she was poor and hadn't paid for lunch yet. The whole class quickly joined in, turning it into a cruel trial of judgment. Satoru and Kenya stepped up to defend Hinizuki, arguing that anyone could have framed her. Teacher Yashiro intervened, cleverly ending the argument by saying that since Kayo was in charge of the money that day, it wasn't strange that it was with her. The teacher knew about Hinizuki's situation and was trying to protect her in his own way, but Satoru knew such efforts were far from enough and time was running out. After school, Hinizuki thanked Satoru for defending her, and during their conversation, she told him about her long-standing grudge with Misato since 3rd grade, but also mentioned a beautiful memory of the sparkling Christmas tree at Misato's house during a Christmas party. Seizing the moment, Satoru came up with an idea. He suggested that they go see a Christmas tree together right now. Satoru led Hinizuki up a snow-covered hill where a solitary old tree stood, its branches shimmering with frost under the dim evening light, and he called it their Christmas tree. On the way, something miraculous happened. They saw a pair of red foxes playing in the snow, a sight Satoru had once witnessed alone in the previous timeline, but this time he was able to share it with Hinizuki. When they reached the top of the hill and stood before the tree, a comfortable silence enveloped them both. Hinizuki smiled and called Satoru an idiot because it was February, but there was no coldness in her voice anymore. Satoru responded with a promise that they would return here in the summer to see the tree again, a promise of a future he was risking everything to win back for her. With X Day March 1st fast approaching, Satoru solidified his plan in his mind. He recalled the events from 18 years ago, remembering that on that fateful day, Kayo had been standing alone in the park as usual sometime before 6 p.m., while he had gone to their secret hideout to look for the lost gloves. On the way, he had briefly seen Yuuki-san sitting alone by the river, and by the time he came back and passed through the park again, Hinizuki had vanished without a trace. Thus, his mission became clearer than ever. He had to make sure nothing happened on March 1st, and then celebrate their joint birthday party with Hinizuki the next day, on March 2nd, to prove that he had truly changed the future and erased that crime from history forever. To carry out this plan, the first step was to get Hinizuki out of her toxic environment, especially during the weekends. Therefore, Satoru told his mother that he wanted to go out on Saturday, and his perceptive mother immediately teased him about having a date, even promising to give him extra allowance, making Satoru embarrassed to admit it. With her sharp intuition as a former news reporter, Sachiko quickly guessed that the girl in question was Hinizuki. She advised him to be careful while also subtly showing her support. At school, Satoru tried to invite his close friends Kenya, Kazu, Osamu, and Hiromi to join him and Hinizuki on a trip to the science center. However, they all mysteriously declined, each giving vague excuses about being busy, then suggesting that he would have a better time going alone with Hinizuki. It was obvious they were deliberately giving the two some space, and Satoru realized he would have to face his greatest challenge alone, asking Hinizuki's mother for permission. The confrontation went exactly as he had predicted. Hinizuki's mother was extremely hostile and harsh. She flatly refused, saying that Kayo had to stay home to do chores, and questioned Satoru's motives with insulting words, even calling her own daughter a gloomy child. The argument reached its peak when Satoru, in a moment of anger, accidentally blurted out that he wanted to save his friend, a careless slip that only deepened the woman's suspicion and fury. Just as the situation was at its worst, Satoru's mother, Sachiko, appeared like a savior. She revealed that she had been following the children out of a bad premonition, and like Castrol Power 1 engine oil, she took control of the situation. She confronted Hinizuki's mother directly, using the reasoning of a parent to point out that they should support their children's positive efforts. She also subtly mentioned that their families shared some similarities and extended a polite, yet meaningful invitation to talk, a clever move that successfully subdued the other woman's resistance and forced her to reluctantly agree to let Kayo go out. On Saturday, February 27th, Satoru and Hinizuki enjoyed a pleasant day at the Science Center. It was a sunny day, and Hinizuki seemed to have shed her burdens. She was more relaxed and cheerful, even refraining from calling him an idiot. As they explored, Satoru was struck by a strange sense of déjà vu. He suddenly realized that in the original timeline, he had also come here alone and happened to meet Hinizuki. They had shared a similar conversation. A chilling thought crept into his mind that he might just be unknowingly repeating the same past again. But just as he was sinking into worry, something distinctly different happened. His group of friends suddenly appeared. They said they had finished their own business early and came to join them. This was something entirely new, undeniable proof that his actions had indeed made a difference. Satoru felt a wave of relief and hope wash over him. The future was no longer a fixed path. The following days passed in an optimistic atmosphere. On Monday, February 29th, Hinizuki arrived at school on time, her face bright and full of life, something that had never happened before. Satoru accidentally blurted out a compliment, saying she had a pretty face, which led to another round of teasing from the whole class. He promised to come pick her up the next morning, March 1st, the X day, the day he had to be most vigilant. And finally, the fateful day arrived. Satoru stayed by Hinizuki's side the entire day. He picked her up in the morning. They went to school together, and after class, he insisted on taking her to the children's center to play. Even though she wanted to go home early to prepare his birthday gift, he refused to leave her alone, not even for a second. When night fell and snow began to fall, he escorted her all the way home. Before leaving, he shouted loudly, "I'll come pick you up tomorrow," a bold declaration not only meant for Hinizuki, but also for her mother inside the house, and for anyone who might be lurking nearby, a clear statement that she was no longer alone, that he would always be there. And that night, Satoru successfully passed X day. He believed that he had won. The next morning, March 2nd, the birthday of both of them, Satoru woke up very early, his heart filled with joy and relief. He ran to Hinizuki's house, and together they went to school. However, after class, they were held back by Mr. Yashiro to help with a few small tasks. And when they arrived at Satoru's house, a big surprise was waiting for them. All their friends were there along with Satoru's mother. They had secretly prepared a grand birthday party, a plan in which even Mr. Yashiro had participated. The party took place in a cheerful and heartwarming atmosphere, completely opposite to the lonely birthday Satoru had experienced 18 years ago. Hinizuki laughed a lot, received gifts, and for the first time, she was surrounded by real friends. She apologized to Satoru for not finishing his gift yet, but promised to give it to him the next day, a promise Satoru gladly accepted. When Satoru escorted Hinizuki home, she thanked him and repeated her promise. And that night, Satoru went to sleep with a feeling of absolute triumph. He had done it. He had changed history. But the next morning, he overslept and hurried to school. He sighed in relief when he saw he wasn't late. But then one line from the teacher shattered his entire world. "So only Kayo is late today." Hinizuki hadn't come to school. Satoru froze. He realized that the day after the birthday party, Hinizuki hadn't shown up, and the promise they had made to each other the night before would never be fulfilled. The cruel truth hit Satoru like a devastating blow. Hinizuki hadn't come to school. He tried to comfort himself with naive excuses, telling himself she might just be late because she stayed up late finishing his birthday present. But a bad feeling of familiar, creeping fear began to crawl into his mind. He couldn't sit still. He ran out of school and dashed to Hinizuki's house, calling her name in vain before a silent, cold home. Then he noticed a troubling sign: footprints from adult-sized boots pressed into the old layer of snow from 2 nights before, clear evidence that a grown man had been there after he left. All hope inside him crumbled. He knew he had failed. He hadn't been able to change the girl's fate. For the next 2 days, Satoru stayed home from school, drowning in guilt and despair. While at home, he happened to overhear his mother, Sachiko, on the phone with a former colleague from the Ishikari TV station. They were discussing keeping the news of Hinizuki's disappearance out of the media to avoid public panic and protect other children. Satoru realized that even in the past, his mother had always been quietly trying to shield him from cruel truths. Sachiko comforted him, saying it wasn't his fault, that no one could do everything. But her words couldn't ease the feeling of helplessness and guilt tormenting him. At school, the homeroom teacher announced that Kayo had moved to live with her grandmother in Sapporo due to family reasons, a lie agreed upon by the school and the Parents' Association to silence rumors. But Satoru knew the truth. He noticed that despite the media blackout, a police car still stood watch near Hinizuki's house, a sign that an investigation was quietly underway. And then, history began to repeat itself cruelly. Just 6 days after Hinizuki's disappearance, the second victim, Nakanishi Aya, a student from Izumi Elementary School, also went missing. The focus of the investigation immediately shifted to a series of child abductions, and the police car near Hinizuki's house began appearing less frequently. In a moment of unbearable heartbreak, Satoru saw Hinizuki's mother throwing away a garbage bag. Inside were a pair of half-knitted wool gloves, the unfinished birthday gift Hinizuki had promised to give him, a shattered symbol of a promise that would never be kept. And right after that, Satoru's world collapsed. The revival phenomenon ended abruptly, hurling him back to the cruel reality of 2006. He found himself once again a 29-year-old fugitive hiding beneath a bridge, and through the crackling of police radios, he heard his name declared the prime suspect in the murder of his own mother, Fujinuma Sachiko. The cruel reality crashed down on him. He had failed to save Hinizuki, his mother was dead, and now he was a wanted man. With no other choice, he had to keep running. While on the run, he sought help from his manager at the pizza shop, lying that he had argued with his mother and run away from home. The kind-hearted manager let him stay without suspicion. However, when Satoru watched the evening news, he realized it wouldn't be long before his identity was revealed, and that the manager, being a law-abiding citizen, would surely call the police. Just as he expected, while preparing to escape once more, he was discovered but not by the police, rather by his coworker Eri. She had found him, and without hesitation, helped him escape in her car. Eri drove Satoru to her uncle's house, where she was staying, and revealed that she knew everything from the news and from the police questioning her workplace. Despite that, she completely believed in his innocence. She said firmly that a man like him could never murder his loving mother, and her unconditional faith became a powerful source of strength for Satoru in his darkest hour. She also returned the book about the 18-year-old case that he had left behind, and as they reviewed it together, Satoru noticed a crucial detail. He had missed the date of Hinizuki's death in the record had changed. It was no longer March 1st, but March 3rd, the Doll Festival. He realized he hadn't completely failed. His actions had kept Hinizuki alive for 2 more days. History could change. Hope flickered within him once again. If he were given another chance, he might still save her. However, their safety didn't last long. The manager called Eri, pretending to be concerned and offering help. But in reality, he was trying to extract their location to report to the police. Eri's sharp intuition saw through the deceit, and she directly confronted him, expressing her disappointment in his lack of trust, forcing them to flee their hideout once again. While hiding under a bridge, Satoru asked Eri why she could trust him so completely, and she told him a story from her past about how her father had been falsely accused of shoplifting, and though he was innocent, her mother's lack of faith destroyed their family. Since then, Eri had vowed that she would always choose to stand on the side of trust. She told Satoru, "It's not that I can trust you, it's that I want to trust you," an act of conviction to avoid repeating her mother's mistake. Then Eri left to fetch some clothes for Satoru. When she returned home and finished preparing everything, her phone received a text message. It was from Satoru's mother's number. The message read, "Stay where you are." Eri instantly realized the killer had taken Satoru's mother's phone. He knew she was alone and was watching her. And moments later, flames erupted from Eri's house, a deadly trap set to kill her. Satoru and Eri now faced an uncertain and terrifying fate. Eri continued her story, explaining that later, her mother had confessed she regretted not trusting her husband, and that moment had made Eri realize she should continue to love them both, that faith in people was one of her most precious qualities. Her heartfelt confession was brutally interrupted when the fire suddenly roared through the house. Hiding nearby, Satoru was stunned when he heard people shouting that Eri was still inside. Without a moment's hesitation, he charged into the inferno, risking his life to save the only person who had ever placed her faith in him. He found Eri unconscious amid the thick, choking smoke, and while struggling to get her out, feeling his strength draining away, the pizza shop manager suddenly appeared and helped him bring Eri to safety. Afterward, the manager told Satoru to run, saying he would take all the credit for saving her to cover for him. As Satoru ran away, his mind began analyzing the situation frantically. He realized the murderer had deliberately set the fire to kill Eri and frame him for it. During the escape, Eri had secretly slipped her phone into his pocket, so the police wouldn't find the trap message sent by the killer, who had used his mother's phone number. This proved the murderer knew Eri's address. He might have been stalking her or had seen her at the pizza shop when he came there to check Satoru's work schedule as part of his plan to kill Satoru's mother. Satoru understood that his enemy was very close, that he couldn't keep running forever, and that he had to take the initiative to find him. Either he would find the killer, or he would be caught while trying. With that resolve, Satoru used his mother's phone contacts to reach out to Sawada, a former reporter she had trusted. The call started with tension and caution, but eventually, they agreed to meet. Satoru arrived at the meeting point, and Sawada immediately expressed his belief in Satoru's innocence, saying that a mother like Sachiko would never raise a murderer. He shared the content of his last conversation with her, in which Sachiko had insisted that Shiratori-jun, or Yuuki-san, was innocent, and that she had identified the real culprit. Sawada then laid out the entire course of the 18-year-old case based on police records, a story meticulously constructed to frame Yuuki-san, including the claim that he kidnapped Kayo from the warehouse, killed her in a freezer, and returned the body, a scenario Satoru knew was entirely false. Sawada further explained the killer's modus operandi, a disturbingly intelligent man who staged crime scenes to frame innocent people nearby, turning them into suspects to slow the investigation and erase any trace leading back to himself. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Eri faced another kind of battle. She was surrounded by relatives who had been convinced by the media and police that Satoru was a murderer and arsonist, and that she was a manipulated victim. Eri felt pain and helplessness as no one believed her when she tried to defend Satoru's innocence. Back to the investigation, with Sawada's documents, Satoru made a breakthrough. He discovered a fatal flaw in the police's reasoning about the third victim, Sujita Hiromi. They believed Hiromi had been killed due to being mistaken for a girl, but Satoru, recalling his childhood, knew that was wrong. The killer had fully known Hiromi was a boy and had intentionally killed him for that very reason to remove himself from the initial suspect list, which would likely have included only men unfamiliar with Hiromi. This meant the real killer's name had to be among the suspects listed before Hiromi's murder. At the hospital, Eri's mother came to visit her, and upon hearing her daughter desperately defending Satoru and expressing the pain of not being believed, she recalled her own regrets for not trusting her husband in the past. She told Eri that she believed her and helped her escape from the hospital. Eri immediately contacted Satoru, and they agreed to meet under their usual bridge. Although Satoru feared it might be a police trap, he decided to go because he trusted Eri and she came alone. There, Eri provided Satoru with her final suspect, a man named Nishizono, a city councilman and regular customer at the pizza shop, someone who could easily access their work schedules and addresses. However, the name Nishizono was not on Sawada's list of suspects, leaving Satoru at another dead end. He felt like the god of death character he once imagined in his manga, a person with good intentions who only brought misfortune to those around him. But Eri pulled him out of despair. She told him that his story was not over yet, and that he needed to have more faith in himself. And in that very moment, when Satoru felt hope reignited by Eri's words, the police suddenly emerged from the shadows and arrested him. Eri collapsed, blaming herself for leading the police there, even though she had promised to come alone. As Satoru was handcuffed and taken away, he knew this might be the last time he would ever see her. But instead of sinking into despair, he drew strength from her faith in him. He turned back and thanked Eri, saying that because she believed in him, he could keep fighting. A final farewell, a gesture of gratitude to the only person who stood by his side. In the moment of his arrest, when all hope seemed lost, Satoru's eyes swept through the crowd and stopped on a face, and in that instant, he recognized the true murderer, the one who had destroyed his life. An overwhelming despair and a fierce determination to make things right surged within him. He screamed in silent agony, begging for one more chance, one final return. And it was as if the universe heard his plea. The revival phenomenon activated one last time, hurling him back into the past, back to a pivotal moment. February 27, 1988, at the Science Center, the very moment his friends appeared and the timeline first changed. But this time, Satoru was no longer a confused child. He was a warrior carrying the memories of pain and failure. He told himself that this was his final chance. He had to succeed at all costs. Even if he had to act alone, even if he had to do ugly things, he would leave no regrets behind. Later, as the group was heading home, his intelligent friend Kenya asked Satoru about a book he claimed to have lent him, a detail Satoru could not recall, because it was a memory from 18 years in the future. When he got home, his deep thoughtfulness worried his mother, and he accidentally mentioned something from the future, information about a direct train line to Yuno. It was a confusing remark for her at the time, but a crucial piece in the larger puzzle. The next day, February 29th, Satoru decided he could no longer act alone. He needed an ally. He used the non-existent book as an excuse to speak privately with Kenya, and in the empty hallway, Kenya revealed the truth. He knew that book didn't exist. It had been a test. With an insight far beyond his age, Kenya confronted Satoru, saying he felt Satoru had changed, as if another person, another identity, existed within him. Kenya admitted that he had long known about Hinizuki's bruises but felt powerless to act, and Satoru's actions seemed like a silent reproach against his own cowardice. Then he asked a question, "Satoru, who are you?" Faced with such incredible perceptiveness, Satoru gave the only truthful answer he could. He said he wanted to become a superhero. A simple confession, yet one filled with conviction, that persuaded Kenya. Satoru decided to place his full trust in his friend and revealed that Hinizuki was about to be murdered. Instead of doubting him, Kenya immediately sided with Satoru, saying that he already was a superhero and that he wanted to be one too. From that moment, an alliance was formed. With a trustworthy ally, Satoru's plan became bolder and more assured. He sent Hinizuki with Kenya and Hiromi to the children's center while he went to meet Yuuki-san. Through clever questioning, he confirmed the location of Yuuki-san's father's room, and also learned that Yuuki-san no longer met with Hinizuki because she now had friends. Yuuki-san's genuine joy upon hearing this only further reinforced his innocence in Satoru's eyes. He understood that the killer had merely seen them together and decided to frame a gentle, trusting man. After the birthday party on March 2nd, when night fell, Satoru began to act. He sneaked to Yuuki-san's house and threw an ice block to smash his father's room window. A deliberate act of vandalism meant to call the police and create an airtight alibi for Yuuki-san on the very night of the crime. Then he hid near Hinizuki's house to watch her mother, and a dark rage rose within him. He considered eliminating her, removing the direct threat to Hinizuki, but Kenya intervened in time, reminding him that if he became a murderer he could protect no one, and pulled him back from the brink. Satoru then decided to carry out his final, most reckless plan. He would kidnap Hinizuki himself. He met her after the party and bluntly said, "I'll kidnap you now," and Hinizuki, with absolute trust, simply replied, "Okay." They went together to an abandoned bus, their secret hideout, where Kenya was waiting. They turned the cold bus into a cozy temporary home, a safe fortress for Hinizuki. That night Satoru returned with cup noodles and they shared a late meal, a rare moment of peace, and Satoru promised Hinizuki a summer camping trip, a pledge to a bright future he was fighting to win back. The next day, March 3rd, they succeeded in keeping Hinizuki safe. Satoru knew that from this moment on everything was uncharted territory. The killer's actions and Hinizuki's mother had become unpredictable. At school they involved Hiromi in the plan, and Hinizuki, with her cleverness, devised a way for everyone to have an excuse if discovered, proving she was no longer a passive victim, but a warrior at their side. Yet that night, while Hinizuki slept, someone came and left something then departed. Satoru began the new day, waking early, and his mother, Sachiko, had quietly prepared an extra boxed lunch for him to take. He went to the secret base on the abandoned bus where Hinizuki waited and they shared breakfast, a peaceful moment before the coming storm. On the way to school, Satoru unexpectedly met Nakanishi Aya, the girl who would have been the second victim, a reminder of what he was fighting to prevent. In class, he and his friends continued the charade. He pretended not to know where Hinizuki was, and later Satoru spoke with Mr. Yashiro, who revealed encouraging news. He had contacted the Child Welfare Center, and they would visit Hinizuki's home that very evening, a crucial step toward rescuing her. As planned, welfare workers with Mr. Yashiro went to Hinizuki's house but found it empty. Her mother had fled when she saw them. Still, Mr. Yashiro reassured everyone that Kayo was safe, implicitly showing his faith in Satoru. Back at their base, Satoru told Hinizuki the news, and in that victorious moment she gave him the belated birthday present, a pair of wool gloves she had knitted herself, and the final promise was fulfilled, moving Satoru to tears. He felt as if he had waited his whole life for this moment. But their joy was short-lived. Hinizuki told him that someone had broken into the bus the previous night, and when they inspected a suspicious cardboard box, they found a set of murder tools, including charcoal for suffocation, spray cans, and other implements. Satoru realized at once that the bus was not a safe refuge, but the killer's stash, the place where he kept his implements. Aware of the imminent danger, Satoru made a decision. He would not run away anymore. He would confront it directly. He took Hinizuki back to his own home, and his mother. Mrs. Sachiko welcomed them with open arms. She did not scold them. Instead, she said she was proud of the children for bravely helping a friend, and she had cooked a large pot of curry as if she had known everything in advance. That night, Hinizuki experienced a real family life. She was bathed in a warm tub, her hair washed and cared for by Sachiko, and she slept peacefully in the living room together with Satoru and his mother, a night of love and safety she had never had before. The next morning, as they shared a cheerful breakfast, Satoru and his mother took Hinizuki back home. Upon seeing her daughter, the mother's anger exploded into a fury. She shouted, accused Satoru and his mother, claimed Sachiko had kidnapped her child and threatened to sue them. But Sachiko, calm and steely, faced her and asked a simple yet deadly question. Had she actually been looking for Kayo for the past 3 days? The question exposed Akemi's selfishness and irresponsibility, driving her into a crazed state. As she reached for a shovel to attack her own mother, Satoru stepped forward to protect his mother. Sachiko looked Akemi straight in the face and told her bluntly that the only person she cared about was herself. At the height of the confrontation, staff from the Child Welfare Center arrived together with Mr. Yashiro, a plan Sachiko and Yashiro had arranged beforehand, and Akemi realized she had been trapped. She tried to drag Kayo away, but was stopped by the sudden appearance of her own mother, Kayo's grandmother. the woman she had long cut off contact with. Confronted by her mother, Akemi's hardened facade shattered. Her mother apologized for not being there to help her through the hardships of single parenthood, and that empathy completely broke Akemi down. She clung to her mother in the snow and wept like a child, calling "Mom," a plaintive cry that revealed a multi-generational tragedy. Satoru noticed that Kayo did not run to comfort her mother, because for the girl that mother was not a refuge but the source of all her pain. Akemi was taken away to receive help. Mr. Yashiro praised Satoru, saying that his courageous efforts should not end in tragedy. His words were a great consolation to Satoru, sounding like something a father would say. Kayo was placed in her grandmother's care and was truly liberated. When she left, she thanked Satoru a tearful farewell full of hope. Watching her go, Satoru thought of the essay, "The Town Where Only I Vanish," and knew that now Kayo would no longer want to disappear. She would walk her own path toward a bright future. With Kayo safe, the mission was accomplished. But Satoru felt an emptiness because he knew the killer was still out there, and that the next targets would be Hiromi and Nakanishi Aya. He began planning the next mission. He tracked Nakanishi Aya to learn her routines, and once, by chance, he and his mother hitched a ride with Mr. Yashiro. During the trip, Satoru accidentally found a box of candies in Yashiro's storage compartment, a small but odd detail, and Yashiro explained that he used them as a substitute for smoking. Satoru then decided he could not act alone anymore. He brought Kenya to their secret base on the abandoned bus and revealed the whole truth. He believed a serial killer was targeting children, and rescuing Kayo from abuse was only part of a larger plan to stop that murderer. Kenya admitted Satoru's story sounded crazy but chose to trust his friend. He said the important thing was not whether the story made sense, but whether he believed Satoru, and he chose to believe. Hiromi then joined their alliance. All three were willing to do anything to help, and with the support of his friends like-minded superheroes, Satoru no longer felt alone. He recalled with remorse the words, "If only I could have saved her," that he had sobbed to his mother 18 years ago, and he vowed never to let that happen again. He would save everyone. And their final plan began. They decided to proactively approach Nakanishi Aya, so Satoru and Hiromi went together to the places Aya frequented, not knowing that their other friends, Kazu and Osamu, out of curiosity had secretly followed them. At the elementary school graduation, Satoru reflected on his original life in 1988, a life haunted by the losses of Kayo, Hiromi, and Nakanishi Aya, and a sense of guilt that had carved a deep hole in his heart. Mr. Yashiro's speech about filling the gaps in each person's soul resonated deeply with him. Now that Hinizuki Kayo was safe, Satoru's mission shifted to the next target, Nakanishi Aya. He and his companions Kenya and Hiromi approached Aya, and after an initially awkward conversation about piano and Shakespeare, they invited her to visit their secret base. Aya at first thought it childish, but she was drawn in by Kazu's sincerity and enthusiasm, which he protected as a symbol of adventure, and from that a friendship blossomed. Aya began spending time at the base, escaping her loneliness, and Kazu volunteered to escort her, coming every day to pick her up after cram school. A pure, lovely relationship formed. Meanwhile, Hiromi also found his own happiness. He confided to Satoru and Kenya that he had always felt lonely because his parents came home late, but taking part in the mission to fill the gaps for Kayo and Aya helped him fill his own emptiness. With the three original victims now wrapped in friendship and no longer alone, Satoru felt as if his mission had been accomplished. However, an unease remained. He realized he had only saved the victims, not caught the killer, and that the killer, stripped of his intended prey, would surely search for alternative targets. Then he noticed Misato Yanagihara, the classmate who had been ostracized after the lunch money incident, and realized that Misato's isolation had made her an ideal new target. Satoru's fear was confirmed when he learned that Mr. Yashiro had invited Misato to watch an ice hockey game, a pretext to bring her to a secluded place, and Satoru knew he had to act. He went to the rink to watch Misato. Suddenly Misato stood up and went toward the restroom. Time crawled. Satoru grew anxious, thinking she had been gone too long, and at that moment Mr. Yashiro appeared holding a lollipop. He asked Satoru what he was doing there, and Satoru stammered that he wanted to talk to Misato, but Yashiro casually announced that Misato had already left, which stunned Satoru because the game hadn't even started. Immediately after, he saw the Shiratori families truck the family of a classmate suspected in the past, and he turned to Mr. Yashiro saying there was something he had to check right away and begged for his help. In Yashiro's car, Satoru tried to explain the situation. He spoke of their detective game and their friends, a cover for their efforts to protect lonely children. He explained that they pretended a kidnapper was lurking and sought friendship with girls who were often alone. Yashiro listened and praised Satoru, saying it didn't matter if they were only playing if it produced real results. But then the conversation took a worrying turn. Yashiro praised Satoru's spirit and courage for recognizing Misato's loneliness. Satoru confessed that he only knew that because Hiromi had told him, and he felt guilty for indirectly using Misato as bait to lure the killer out. Yashiro comforted him with a twisted philosophy, saying that using bait was a legitimate tactic, and that Satoru's recent unusually friendly behavior toward everyone was all part of that purpose. Satoru then voiced his own thoughts that he wanted to fill the void in everyone's hearts, both his own and others, and in that instant, he realized his fatal mistake. Those were the exact same words Yashiro had used in his graduation speech in the previous timeline. Yashiro smiled strangely, saying that great minds think alike, and that it was precisely his own life philosophy, something he had planned to speak about on graduation day if he were assigned to the 6th grade class. Yashiro continued his monologue, telling Satoru that he didn't need to feel guilty or ashamed about using Misato as bait, because good and evil were merely two sides of the same coin, actions that people took to compensate for their own shortcomings, a line of thought so extreme it sent chills down Satoru's spine. Yashiro went on to reveal that he himself had done all sorts of things to get close to a certain person, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, even resorting to dirty tricks, and that it had been fun. Naively, Satoru asked if that person was a girlfriend, to which Yashiro replied that it was similar to romance in a sense, as both were ways to fill a hole in one's heart. Then he reached toward the glove compartment and asked Satoru if he wanted a candy. But when Satoru looked inside and saw the empty candy box, Yashiro uttered a sentence that made Satoru's entire world collapse. "After all, this isn't my car." In that single moment, Satoru understood everything. The killer wasn't some stranger. It was the very teacher he trusted the most. With a smile still on his lips, Yashiro continued his monologue, saying that the happiest moment in a person's life was always changing. And for him, that moment was right now, the moment he could fill the void in his heart by finding what he desired and trying to make it his own. The more obstacles one faced, the greater the happiness in overcoming them. Yashiro confirmed Satoru's lie, saying that he hadn't merely pretended there was a kidnapper. He had acted with certainty that such a person existed. He admitted that at first he refused to believe it, unable to accept that someone could read his mind. With twisted delight, he recounted his entire plan, saying he hadn't recognized Satoru as his opponent until he saw him following Aya. The day he gave Satoru and his mother a ride home was the same day he had intended to execute his plan with Aya, but ironically, he had ended up giving advice to the very boy who had stolen his prey. That was the second time Satoru had ruined his plans, and he began to suspect it wasn't a coincidence. So he set one final trap. He encouraged the lonely Misato to attend ice hockey games and then informed Hiromi about it, knowing Hiromi would tell Satoru, and if Satoru appeared, his suspicion would turn to certainty that Satoru was his enemy. His plan worked flawlessly. He gave Misato a drink laced with laxatives to lure her into the restroom and arranged a delivery from Shiratori Foods so that the truck would appear at the exact right time, creating a fake scene to deceive Satoru. Every piece of the puzzle had fallen perfectly into place, just as he'd planned. He said this was his true self, and that the car they were in was one he had just taken specially chosen because there were many others of the same model and color in the area, allowing him to switch them as decoys at any time. Satoru felt like a fool. The truth had been right in front of him all along, and he had failed to see it. He recalled every clue, every word, every action of Yashiro's, even remembering that the name Yashiro Gaku had been on the list of suspects he'd seen at Sawada's house, but because his mother's name had been there too, and because he had trusted Yashiro too deeply, he had deceived himself and removed his teacher from the list of suspects. But now, faced with the naked truth, he had to accept that the murderer was none other than Yashiro, who was sitting right before his eyes. The car sped through the night, and snow began to fall, creating a beautiful yet foreboding scene that heralded a cold death. Yashiro drove the car under a bridge and stopped midway. He told Satoru that he couldn't unfasten his seatbelt, that this was the end of the game for both of them. Yashiro admitted that he still couldn't believe how Satoru had predicted his every move and ruined his plans. It sent chills down his spine, as if Satoru could see the future. Yashiro said that what he was about to do wasn't out of revenge for Satoru. On the contrary, he truly admired him. He saw killing Satoru as a substitute for his own unfulfilled desire. Satoru shouted, "Didn't you say this was the end of the game for both of us, sensei?" Yashiro didn't answer directly. Instead, he said that Satoru would bring peace to this town. That was what Satoru wanted, and as for him, he would personally bring death to Satoru, purely for his own satisfaction. Satoru screamed in despair, cursing Yashiro and swearing he would not die until he saw him destroyed. But Yashiro coldly replied that it was a vain ambition. With a press of the accelerator, the car plunged into the icy river below. In those final moments submerged in the freezing water, as the air in his lungs ran out and his consciousness faded, images of his dearest ones flashed through Satoru's mind: his mother, his friends, Kayo, and Eri, the girl who had believed in him in the future. He was freezing, helpless, and seemed to have been swallowed by fate once more, sinking deep into the cold darkness. In a chilling monologue from the murderer, Gaku Yashiro began his story with a memory from the past, a glimpse into his twisted, psychopathic nature. When he was a 6th grader, a female classmate had brought him a box containing about 7 or 8 hamsters, the result of careless breeding, and she didn't know what to do with them. Yashiro took them home and performed an experiment. He filled a large liquor bottle with water and dropped all of them inside. 3 hours later, after dinner, he returned to his room and was mesmerized by the sight before him. Only one hamster had survived, standing atop the other's corpses to keep itself from drowning, a cruel image of survival that sent shivers down his spine. He decided to keep that hamster and named it Spice. The event reminded him of the parable The Spider's Thread, a story about a sinner named Candida, who was condemned to hell but had once performed a single act of mercy by sparing a spider's life. Because of that, the Buddha sent down a thread from heaven to save him. But as Candida began to climb, he kicked away the other sinners who tried to cling to the thread, and in that moment, it snapped, causing him to fall back into the depths of hell. Yashiro continued, explaining that ever since meeting Spice, he began to see spider threads hanging above certain people's heads, and he would kill anyone he saw with that thread until one day, a boy named Satoru ruined his plans. Then, a spider thread appeared above that boy's head as well. Though Yashiro had tried to kill Satoru, the boy survived, and Yashiro decided to nickname him Spice and began observing him. The story then shifted to the present, where Satoru finally woke up after 15 years in a coma. His mind was still that of an 11-year-old, but his body had grown into that of a 26-year-old. He felt confused and disoriented in a world so different, a new era he had never known. His mother, Sachiko, with extraordinary love and perseverance, had spent the past 15 years dedicating 4 hours a day caring for his body, ensuring that his joints and muscles would not atrophy. She even used an EMS device during the last 3 years to prepare for the day he would awaken, and thanks to that, his recovery was considered a medical miracle. Dr. Kitamura repeatedly expressed amazement at his condition. Although Satoru had regained consciousness, he had lost most of his important memories, especially those related to the incident that had put him into a coma. Those memories seemed to be locked away behind a closed door in his mind. He could read and understand complex adult words such as endurance, heart monitor, and sense of loss, a sign that the memories from his 29-year-old timeline still existed somewhere. However, he couldn't remember the crucial events that had happened when he was a child. This contradiction made him deeply confused about himself. Satoru's new life began with reunions with his old friends. Kenya and Hiromi were now grown and successful. Kenya had become a lawyer, and Hiromi a doctor. They visited him in the hospital, and Satoru had cheerful conversations with them about trivial things. But he noticed that Kenya seemed to want to ask him something important yet hesitated, perhaps because his mother had warned him to be careful. His mother seemed to be trying to prevent him from recalling the past. She had lived solely for him for 15 years, and Satoru felt that if she didn't want him to remember, maybe he shouldn't try. However, a fateful encounter changed everything. During his rehabilitation training, Satoru unexpectedly met Hinizuki Kayo again, the girl he had once risked his life to save in the past. Kayo was now married to Hiromi and had become Sujita Kayo. She was holding an adorable baby boy named Mirai, meaning future. Kayo confessed to Satoru that they had felt guilty for finding happiness while he lay motionless, as if they had left him behind. But Satoru, with a maturity beyond his remembered years, assured her that he held his own destiny and that they didn't need to feel guilty. He believed that the person he was now was the result of his own choices. With tears in her eyes, Kayo thanked Satoru, saying that she had once imagined only a lonely life. But now she had a family, and it was all thanks to him. Those words, along with the image of Mirai, the future he had helped create, deeply moved Satoru. Even though he couldn't remember exactly what he had done, a flame of determination reignited in his heart. Driven by a newfound purpose, Satoru threw himself seriously into rehabilitation, asking the doctor to double his training schedule, hoping to be able to walk outside as soon as possible. During this time, he also befriended a little girl named Kumi, who was being treated for leukemia and was about to undergo surgery. Using his own experience, he encouraged her to be brave, telling her that to find courage, she should imagine the smiles of those she loved and of course, she herself must smile too. This pure friendship showed that Satoru's kindness and desire to protect others had never changed. However, his sudden fame also attracted the attention of paparazzi from gossip magazines, who secretly photographed him in the hospital courtyard. Someone had to intervene to protect him. This nuisance set the stage for the final encounter. One day, a strange man appeared, introducing himself as Nishizono Manabu, a politician. Yet Satoru felt a strange sense of familiarity. Then the man revealed his true identity. He was Gaku Yashiro, Satoru's 5th grade homeroom teacher, the murderer who had tried to drown him 15 years ago. Even though Satoru hadn't yet regained his memories, he still talked with him. Yashiro explained that he had changed his name after marrying into a politician's family and had now inherited his father-in-law's political career. He even revealed that he was the one who had arranged for Kumi to be admitted to that very hospital. Through his connection with a hospital director, he said he had known Satoru had awakened early and had eagerly waited 15 years to meet him again. His words were full of falseness and an unmistakable, veiled threat. One afternoon Yashiro sought Satoru out and suggested they go somewhere quieter to talk, away from the paparazzi. He led Satoru to a secret elevator and brought him to the hospital rooftop, a secluded, forbidden place whose setting reminded Yashiro of the secret base Satoru and his friends used to have, and there, on the windy rooftop, facing his mortal enemy, Satoru played his final card. He declared that he had recovered his memories. On the cold hospital rooftop under a gray sky, the final confrontation between Satoru and his arch-enemy reached its climax as Yashiro neared his end. When Satoru announced he had regained all his memories, the last fragments of the past fell into place in his mind through the emotional reunion with Hinizuki. Kayo, the girl he had saved, was now a happy mother, and the sight of her and her son Murray, together with her sincere thanks, acted as a powerful catalyst that flung open the locked door in his memory. Satoru finally remembered everything. He remembered that he had saved Hinizuki from a tragic fate. Then with his friends had worked to make sure Aya and Misato were no longer lonely, turning them into harder targets for the predator. Satoru's strength came not only from recovered memories, but from the unwavering support of his friends. In a later conversation with Kenya, he learned that his friends had never abandoned him. Kenya explained that he had deliberately avoided probing the past to give Satoru time to heal physically and mentally. But if Satoru intended to fight alone again, they would not allow it. Kenya revealed that during Satoru's 15-year coma, Satoru's brave actions had become an inspiration to everyone. Hiromi, after visiting Satoru in the hospital, became a doctor, and Kenya became a lawyer and continued cooperating with Sawada to search for the assailant who attacked Satoru. They had grown from children into strong adults, all eager to catch up with their hero and fight alongside him. Kenya's words echoed in Satoru's mind like Eri's words about wanting to trust someone for her own sake, and Satoru realized the truth. He was not alone. He had allies and true friends he could rely on. Bolstered by that confidence, Satoru confronted Yashiro, who remained, as he had been 15 years before, obsessed with the idea that Satoru could predict his every move, as if Satoru could see the future, and Satoru confirmed that fact. Instead of showing fear, Yashiro laughed eerily and revealed his final plan, an elaborately staged scheme to drive Satoru to death. He knew Satoru was secretly recording the conversation, perhaps calling Kenya, but he did not care, because the statute of limitations for the 15-year-old case had expired, and he insisted he would commit no further crimes. Instead, he had manufactured a new crime. He revealed that Kumi's ramen 4 bag, the leukemia patient Satoru befriended, would be infused at 4:30 p.m. with a deadly muscle relaxant, and Satoru's fingerprints had been planted on the bag. Yashiro's scenario was that Satoru, in an act of mercy killing for a frightened young girl facing surgery, had acted and was then tormented by guilt and committed suicide by rolling a wheelchair off the rooftop, a perfect, inescapable trap. Yashiro forced Satoru to choose, either reveal the secret of seeing the future to gain a slim chance to save Kumi, or remain silent and let them both die. But time had run out, and Yashiro believed he had won, convinced that Satoru's words about the future were nothing but lies. However, Satoru turned the tables with a psychological strike. He recalled a conversation with his mother, who had realized he regained his memories when Kayo visited. She hadn't tried to stop Kayo because she knew Satoru had grown up and needed to face his own past. Satoru was inspired by the philosophy of filling the voids within oneself, a lesson once taught to him by Yashiro. Looking straight into his enemy's eyes, Satoru explained that their game had ended long ago, and the true winner was him because he had saved everyone. Hinizuki, Kayo, Nakanishi Aya, Hiromi, and even his own mother, whom Yashiro had killed in the original timeline. He revealed his greatest secret, that he had relived his life many times, and because he knew Yashiro's future, he was able to destroy all of his plans. That was the reason why Yashiro couldn't kill anyone connected to Satoru, including Satoru himself. For 15 years, Yashiro hadn't killed him not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. Satoru had become Yashiro's reason for existence, his purpose in life, his hope, the only person in the world who could fill the emptiness in his heart. Satoru had stripped Yashiro of his purpose as a killer, and replaced it with his own existence, and thus, Satoru had won. These words pierced deeply into Yashiro's hollow soul, completely shattering him. In a fit of desperate rage, he lunged forward, shouting that he would win again. But Satoru pushed his wheelchair toward the edge of the rooftop. Yashiro didn't realize he was stepping into the final trap. He rushed forward to grab Satoru, but then understood he had been waiting for this moment too long. He let Satoru fall. Watching Satoru plummet, Yashiro unconsciously smiled a twisted smile of release, because he believed he couldn't live without Satoru. And then, he threw himself after him. But it was a fall carefully planned. Below, Satoru's friends Kenya and the others had already set up a massive air cushion. Satoru was saved, while Yashiro was caught on the spot and arrested for attempted murder. Satoru's perfect plan, built on absolute trust in his friends and a deep understanding of his enemy's psychology, had succeeded. In the days that followed, Satoru reflected on the 15 years he had lost. He no longer saw them as a loss, but as a treasure, because in a world where he had been erased, his friends had been able to live full, happy lives. In the end, he became a manga artist, and his work My Hero was a reflection of his own life. He found peace and no longer experienced the phenomenon of revival. And to make the life of the time traveler even more beautiful, on a snowy night beneath a familiar bridge, he met Eri once more, the girl who had believed in him unconditionally. Their reunion marked a new beginning, a future he had fought with everything to obtain. Satoru had truly filled the emptiness in his heart and had become a hero in every sense of the word. The anime ends here. Goodbye.